What's up, y'all? Back for another episode of our full site build here. Today we're going to build out the process section here. I'm going to go ahead and dive in to the builder here. Prior to doing that, there was one thing I forgot to do in our service section. So I'm going to quickly do that, and it has to do with our cards. So I'm going to get that open here, get into my service list and my card. I'm going to edit my component here. And on the service card, I need to change this to an article. And the great part about using a component like this is I only have to change it in one spot, and it is going to change that everywhere for me. All right, I can exit that. That just is a better semantic HTML for that specific item. All right, on to the next part. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that just so it doesn't make me scroll as far. So I just did that by clicking the show and hide. It still shows on the front end. It just, as you can see, I had to scroll through a handful of those loops that were showing. So doing this just makes it a little bit simpler for me. All right, I'm going to add in a section. I'm going to name this process section. Have my inner. Going to add in my section intro, pull that up to the top here. And in this one, we are going to add in inside the inner, I'm going to do a flex div, and inside that flex div, another flex div. This is going to be my list item. Call this my list wrapper. This is going to be a UL, and this will be an LI. Now I can go ahead and create my BEM classes for this. First thing I want to do, if we go back and look at our design here, our background is going to be our secondary color. So I'm going to set my background to secondary. And I believe I actually do want that to be the secondary dark, because this should be our main color there. So I'm going to leave it as dark for now. In my intro, I need to set this to our primary color, which changed that to the light color. As we can see, we don't want the pill on this one, and we need to go with how it works. And I need to wrap this in my span. All right, and then lastly, we just need our lead to drop in here, and we're good to go on our intro component. So now let's dive into our actual cards. So we're going to put those inside of a list item, and inside here I'm going to add in a flex div. Let's take a look at what we have here. So I'll need a wrapper around this top part, and I'll probably want a wrapper down here because it looks like the spacing is a little bit narrower down here than it is up here. So 2 wrappers inside of there. I'm just going to call this my process card right away. Add 2 flex divs. I'll do content wrapper. And again, I always like to do that first, and we'll move the icon up after the fact using CSS, so that way it's in the proper order in our DOM. Now for this, I'll just call this my counter wrapper. Inside here, I want a div, and inside that div, I want an icon. Not an iframe. I want an icon. Inside my content, I'm going to have a heading and some text. Text I'm going to change to description, and this I'm going to change to an H3. And you can see this is showing up as dark right now, which we will fix once we start styling everything. All right, that should be everything I need in here. And if you're wondering how I'm going to get this in here, I'm going to do that dynamically. So I'll show you guys how we're going to do that once we start building out the card here. So first thing I'm going to do is come back up to my process card, and I'm going to create my BEM classes for it. On my process card, we want this to be a flex column. I'm going to center it. We're going to need space M for our padding, our content gap, and then I'm going to need my border radius. Again, I'm using the quick actions to do some of these, which makes it nice. We need a background color. I don't want it to be primary, but I do want it to be our secondary color. So that's a little bit lighter. And maybe, let me go on here and see what we ended up doing on this one. We went with secondary medium, which is not actually a color we can use. I'm gonna go semi-dark actually. I like that. Still a good contrast between the background and this. So I'm happy with the card, the content wrapper. I'm going to set to flex column. And on this, I want to set my gap to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go with space XS on that one. For my heading, let's go ahead and grab one of these just so we have some actual text in here. Okay, we're gonna go color of white on that. I'm gonna copy that over to my heading as well. Now on my heading, I wanna make this a bit smaller. You can see our heading here is a bit smaller. So on this one, I'm gonna go font size of, make it the same size as our H4. Okay. Back to our counter wrapper, I'm going to go order of -1. You can see that brings it to the top. We want to flex row this. We want to go space between and center. I don't need to add any additional padding or anything. I'm going to be good with that. On my icon wrapper, I'm going to set my background to primary ultra light. I need an inline size on that. Let's take a look of 50. Again, I'm going to go with my toRem function and go 50 pixels. Going to copy that and just change my inline to block on this one. So we got a nice 50 by 50 square there. I'm gonna add in my radius. And then on my icon, I'm going to just copy these over here and change them to, let's see what we had in here, 30. in my icon wrapper, I want to also center everything there. So we should be good on that. My icon, I need to change to color of primary, not primary dark. And I'm happy with that. We'll see if once we start putting in our icons here, if we're going to need to swap that out at all, as far as if it's color works, or in this example, we'll just have to add our fill color as well to make sure that works for both scenarios. All right, and I do want to strip those colors on that. All right, so we got our icon and our icon wrapper. We got our heading, we got our description, we got our background and everything. Now, what we're going to do is start building out our actual counter. So in order to do that, I like to use a before, and we need to do this on the actual counter wrapper. So I'm going to go and before in content, and for now I'm just going to type in 01, so you can see that showing up here on the left and pushes our icon all the way to the right. I'm going to go color of primary ultra light on that. I'm going to go font size of, let's try H2, and font weight of heading font weight. Got to put the double dash in the front. My apologies. There we go. And that looks about right to what we wanted. Sizing wise, it's not quite full height of that. I think if I did H1 on this, that's a little bit too big. So I'm going to stick with H2 on that. Now what we don't want to do is have to manually put in our count here, because then what happens is if we move our cards or add to them, we're going to have to manually change that, and that's not the best way to do that. So what we're going to do is actually use a counter. So above my content, I'm going to go counter increment, and I'm going to call this process counter. And in my content here, I'm going to take out the 1. I want the 0 to be there. And then I'm going to have to go counter. And inside of here, we're going to go our process counter. So you can see we got our 1 there. But what we need to do now is, if I were to duplicate this, you can see I'm still at a count of 1. So it's automatically putting my number in there, but it's not giving me the proper count yet. So I'm going to come back. We're going to go up to our actual list wrapper here. And on this, we're going to add in the naming of that. So in our case, that's going to be a counter reset of our process counter, and we want to set that to 0 so that it starts from the beginning. And again, now if I were to duplicate that out, and it didn't work for me, so let's double check that. Process counter of 0. I probably have a typo somewhere in here, so let's just double check. Make sure I have that set the same up here. And I had a typo somewhere. So just copying it and making sure I spelled everything the same definitely helps. So now you can see it's automatically doing that for me, and if I keep adding them, they're going to stay there and keep counting for me. So let's go back up to our actual list wrapper here. And on this, I want to create this as a grid. I'm going to go grid template columns of grid 4. And you can see we have our cards laid out how we want. The next thing we can do is make it so that we can actually make it responsive here. So I'll end up actually moving our grid template columns inside of a container query. All right, so on here I'm going to click the has me, and then we're going to add in a container query, and we'll say anything over 1,000 is going to be our grid 4. When actually that should be a little bit lower, probably a little bit closer to, let's go 900. I think that's probably still okay. I'm going to add another container query. And this one, I'm going to probably say it's going to drop to a grid of 2. And it's going to do that. So I'm actually going to have to add in 2 numbers here. My inline size is to rem of, let's go 600 pixels. We'll test this out. Going to be less than or equal to 600, which will be less than or equal to, I think I'm doing this right. I'll test it out in a minute here. Because we're basically saying that it's my inline size. Okay, I actually have to move that. My bad. So put my inline size in between is greater than or equal to this and greater than or equal to. There we go. Just got to get everything in the right order. So let's go over that again. So in my container query, I'm saying that if my inline size is greater than 600, but less than 900, and I'm going to take this equal out because we have it as equal to up here, it's going to go to a 2-column grid. So it goes from 4 down to 2, and eventually here it's going to squeeze down to 1. And I feel like that actually works pretty good. Those are still fairly well sized. They don't squish too much before they break again. So I'm pretty happy with that. So again, we got that built in and making sure that it's responsive. We use container query with the has me selector. We got our process counter, so this is set up automatically. Now, in my case, we can go ahead and make these into components just in case we end up using them later. The one thing I will say we have to be careful of in this scenario is our process counter reset is outside of our component. So we have to be mindful of that it's not a truly unbreakable setup here, because if I were to use this in a different scenario, whether that's on a different page or something, and I don't copy this section directly, I'm going to have to ensure that these cards are being used inside of a list that has a counter reset on it with the proper process, just to make sure that it works correctly. So that is one thing I wanted to note on that. So let's go ahead and delete out all of these for now. I'm going to take my process card, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create component. In here, I'm going to need my media and 2 text items. Let's go ahead and set this to heading. We'll set this to description. We'll put these in. And then for my icon, I will have to manually set that in here. And let's go ahead and hit save and exit. So now if I duplicate 4 of these, you can again see our counter is working right. Then I'm going to have to copy over my other text here. I have it on the other screen just to make my life a little bit easier. And this one needs to be the clipboard. And this one needs to be the wrench. And the last one is the thumbs up. Put in my content here. All right, so we got all of those, and you will notice that our cards are all different sizes. So let's jump back up to our list items. I'm going to set that to flex row, and I always like to just add flex 1 on there just to be safe. So now it's going to take up that full space. You can see we have our number, our icon. On my first one, I need to go ahead and let's set this to the top actually. And that's not what I wanted to do. I need to do that on the card itself. All right, so let's jump back here on I'm going to hit save here first. Go into our component, and on my process card, I want to actually set this to start. So everything is at the top. exit out, and on this first one we need to set our icon. I believe it was the phone. And there we go. All right, so we got all 4 of those set up properly. If I look at my design here, I didn't push the text down on all of these. So I'm going to leave everything as is. I'm going to hit save. We'll take a look at the front end in a minute. Let me just double check that I got everything as I want in here. Because these cards are not linking to anything else, I'm not going to make them articles like I did on our actual service cards. Okay, let's hit refresh. You can see my service cards are here, and we have our process cards down here at the bottom. All of our icons are right, the counter's working, and just to show you guys, if I take these and order them differently, you can see they still follow the same number pattern, even though I'm actually moving the cards in the order. So it automatically does that for you, which is really nice. If I were to add a 5th one, you can see it automatically makes it number 5. All right, in our case, we only need 4. So let's go ahead and leave it at that. That concludes this video. Let's see what we have next is going to be our review section. This I typically end up using a different plugin for. I use WP Social Ninja, and I actually just import the reviews right in from their Google Business profile. That way, as they get more, they automatically show up on the website. So for that, I'm not going to do anything besides put in a container or a wrapper for it, and eventually I'll have a short code going in there. Because I don't actually have a connection to their Google profile at the moment, I won't be able to fully set that up. What I might be able to do is just put in some or copy and paste over a couple of them into a template and put the template in. So maybe before I do the next video, I will show you guys that. But if you guys have any questions on the process section, go ahead and drop a comment below. Let me know what you guys are thinking of the series so far. Drop a like, drop a comment, and I appreciate y'all watching. Thanks.